you know what screen you see? Do you see the map?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
So are we live?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
Hello.
2023,
Hello.
we have 3 administrative adjustment hearings tonight. Anybody that's presenting, is everybody here for the first case? 2304?
Yes,
Yeah.
myself and Joy Strom are here for this case.
Okay, hello. If you could
Hello.
raise your right hand, please. Do you swear that the evidence you shall give in this administrative adjustment case action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So we run this administrative adjustment similar to a variance request where the staff will give the presentation, the staff report. The applicant will have their ability to respond and provide testimony. And then we will go back to staff for rebuttal and then rebuttal back to the applicant if necessary. And then we will make a decision tonight, and then a formal decision will not be provided for approximately 30 days from whatever the decision from tonight is. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? Okay. Andrea, if you want to start with the first case.
Sure, thank you. Administrative adjustment case 2304. An application by Joy Schrum on behalf of Dave Cummings, the property owner, has requested an administrative adjustment for 56 West Main for the zoning ordinance section, primarily 164, 111C, to allow the reduction of the number of required parking spaces. The applicant is requesting the administrative adjustment to establish real estate office use on the existing building that is currently on site. The adjustment application is requesting a reduction of 24 parking spaces. On May 16th, an application was submitted to the Department of Community Planning and Development for this adjustment. The property is zoned CB in the CB business zone, and therefore also it is the property owner is listed as C&C Westminster LLC. The property contains a 2-story, 14,700 square foot building. The first floor is proposed to be renovated for the real estate office. The second floor is proposed for primarily storage, and then as well as the basement for that use as well. This is an allowed use in this zoning district. We have here, the property was posted. We do have pictures of that as well. And all the adjacent property owners did get letters. And we had not heard from any property owner or any adjacent property owners regarding this case. We did put the agenda as well as the staff report online as well. So this, as far as administrative adjustments go, the director does have the ability to grant the administrative adjustments, but the applicant bears the burden of persuasion and proof to justify the granting of this adjustment. The director shall not grant an administrative adjustment if just to do so would violate the spirit and intent of the requirements or cause that would be likely cause substantial injury to public health, safety, and welfare. The proposal, like I said, was for a real estate office. A simplified site plan SS 2308 was submitted to renovate the first floor, as well as do the modifications to the second floor for storage and for the basement. The applicant has not yet submitted the required water and sewer allocation application for this project, but the Department of Community Planning and Development will work with the applicant to get all the required applications that may be needed. So the staff report shows all of the various prospects and things that that needs to be considered in an administrative adjustment, but I'm here to talk about the findings of facts and the conclusions of law. Staff recommends that the director consider the following as fact and findings of conclusions of law. The administrative adjustments that are being requested to allow the reasonable and allowed uses in the CB central business zone to operate at the property. The property is located in the historic district of downtown Westminster, and the primary structure has been on the property and built since 1920. The property has operated as a commercial use in the past without providing additional on-site parking. There are city-owned parking lots in proximity to the property. There are 25 existing spots on site that is being provided based off of the simplified site plan that we received. It's not unusual for properties in the historic downtown district to provide required on-site parking spaces, but also therefore need this modification based off of the inability to provide the other parking spaces that are needed. The authorizing of this administrative adjustment will not have any substantial detriment to adjacent property owners and will not materially impair the proposed purpose of the chapter or the public interest. Staff recommends the approval of the proposed administrative adjustment. And as you know, there are representatives if you do have any additional questions.
Thank you. I have no questions at this time. Applicant, whoever's going.
Dave, do you want me to go first?
I can go first. I mean, I'll just quickly
Okay.
go first. I know we don't really have a plan, but first I just to say, like to start off by saying thank you guys both for all your work on preparing this tonight and looking at all our stuff. I'm excited to be moving forward with this project, and I am a good neighbor. Basically, I've got some other properties. I have 10 other office locations. I pride myself on, keeping our properties looking nice, flowers, doing everything right. I'm detail oriented. So, I'm not here to cause any problems. I want to, better the building, better the main street, better downtown, do whatever I can to help. So, that just off the bat. And, it'd be greatly appreciated if you could approve this. My realtors that work under my company are not kind of like what I kind of sometimes use an example of. They're not like lawyers where like a lawyer goes to their office and they're there all day long and they're on calls and emails and meeting clients. My folks are, they may take an office, but they work from home. They're out on the streets, they're out and about showing houses, meeting people. They're just not in office type of people. So I have lots of these different locations, and you'll go in and you'll have, 4,000 square feet and there'll be 5 people there. So I do not believe that we'll be like taxing on the, adjacent parking around the neighborhood, on downtown. So, I just wanted to kind of put that out there. I don't know if there's anything else, Joy, that you wanted to add.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure I understood that we are requesting an additional reduction of the 23.2 spots that were required after the zoning, after everything was reviewed. So we were hoping for an additional reduction.
So the reason that I rounded it to the 24 is just because we can't have like a portion of a parking space.
Yeah, 23.2.
that's
Okay,
why-
okay. Yeah.
So yeah,
Okay.
after everything was said and done for taking off the 25% for being in the downtown zone, for being the 25 parking spaces that are required, being provided on site. I'm sorry. This is just what was left over based off of the zoning code. So it is this is just where kind of the basis of where we are, and then that is the reduction that you are requesting.
So can
Everything
you,
that Dave said.
so can you explain the use a little bit more to how it operates on an hourly basis as to why this type of office use may be different than a standard office use, which the ordinance is applying the calculations for parking to?
Sure. I mean, we definitely, typically operate, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 p.m. The, banking hours, or when you're going to see, my folks. You're not going to see people there too often after hours. Occasionally somebody will pop in to pick something up or whatever, but it's not like you're going to see lots of people there on nights or weekends. And then, again, I just have so many of these different locations. So we kind of operate where I'll have one staff member that I call like an office administrator. You know, he or she will kind of be the receptionist, and they'll kind of be on site to make sure that there's somebody, you know, right now there was no on-site property management with the previous tenant. So the staff member will make sure everything's, you know, looks okay inside and outside the building. And then, you know, the realtors, we will have, you know, two different conference rooms or whatever it is. Occasionally people will have closings at the office, but a lot of time, depending if they're, you know, if they're the seller, the buyer will have the settlement at the other real estate's office or at the title company. So even though we have settlements, not every single time that there's a settlement with an agent in this location will they even come to our office to actually use it. And then, yeah, I mean, just the nature of the business is they're not in their office all that often. You know, they're independent contractors technically, so they're not required to have any type of office hours or show up to the office at any given time. And we do a once a month meeting, but that's all actually done since COVID via Zoom, because it's just easier to do it this way. So people don't have to drive to the office to do a meeting and then drive and spend gas money. And if they're not there, and all our meetings are recorded. So we don't have like big, you know, monthly gatherings or anything where we'll bring a lot of people in, and they're not required to come at any certain hour. So they, you know, we have, you know, some morning people that show up sometimes in certain offices and they're gone by 11 or 12. And we have some afternoon people that you don't see all day until 2 p.m. So by no means is it ever like really like a hustle bustle type of situation at any of my locations.
So I've worked with Dave for the last 5 or so years on his other offices, and in our experience, there's, you know, 10 or less people in the office throughout the day revolving in and out. So if there's 25 offices, you might have a few agents in the morning, like you said, and then in the evening, you know, a different group of people, and then a closing in the middle of the day. And a closing might be an hour where they're using the conference room, and there might be up to 8 people in there, 8 to 10, but that's not an extended period of time. So.
And even since like COVID, now people do what they call pre-sign. So they don't even close. They do it all remotely. Like the seller has less to sign than the buyer. So they do it like remotely with the title company online. And it's really the only person showing up now for closings is the buyer lots of times. And so it's the buyer, husband, wife, or, you know, buyer and maybe the lender will show up, but it's just usually like the buyer, wife, and like the settlement agent conducting the closing. So yeah, I mean, a lot's changed. You know,
we've designed the office to have a lot of open workspaces for that reason, so that
and
when there's only a few people there, it doesn't feel empty. They're mostly working from some of the open workspaces, and yeah.
So if I'm a client, when do I come to the office? Do I come initially meet my real estate agent at the office, and then we would go out and look at houses? Am I typically just there for the closing aspect of it? What is very
good question. I mean, I don't set parameters on the realtors, but a good question. I mean, so we have what we call like buyer guides, and they're digital and in PDF versions. So a lot of times agents will send a new buyer, say like the buyer guide, and they will kind of go over on the phone with them or Zoom. Occasionally, maybe they would meet the buyer in person at the office. So there could be like a initial buyer consultation, they call it, every so often at the office. But a lot of times people talk to get their criteria over the phone, send them the buyer guide, set them up on a search in the multiple listing service, start sending them houses. If they want to go see a house, then they meet them at the initial house. Sellers do not come in unless they are for some reason closing at the office. If you're going to be listing their house to sell it, you know, the meeting is always at their property to go and do a walkthrough of the property. So sellers don't come into the office. Buyers come in occasionally for a buyer consultation, but a lot of times realtors kind of like talk it out with them on the phone, maybe send them our buyer guide to kind of go over some of the details, and then start, you know, kind of showing them houses, as they say. So yeah, it's not like it's not like a super retail-y real business.
But let's go to the closing then.
Mm-hmm.
So you have attorneys on staff, or the attorneys related to the purchase and sale of the property. They both come to this location. This is where the closings for any property being sold under your business occur.
So the closings could occur at like probably say 3 different places, well, 4 different places. Sometimes people close at their home now, the house they're buying. Some of the agents are doing that. That's becoming a trend because they do what they call a walkthrough before you buy the house. And then they do the walkthrough and they'll just have the settlement agent, which actually doesn't even have to be an attorney. The settlement officer, settlement agent will either come to the buyer's new house, right? Then theirs gotten popular since COVID. They will come to my potential office if we're representing the buyer, because the buyer is the one that kind of chooses the settlement company. Or they will go to the title company. I mean, a lot of times the business is steered to the actual title company that's conducting the closing, because if there's any adjustments need to be made with the settlement sheet, if they're at the title company can redo it on their computers and print it off right then and there and fix it, kind of thing. And then send it back to the lender for approval. So settlements don't even always occur at the office.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. So, well, that's for the first floor. So if I understand correctly, the basement's just going to be storage.
I mean, the
Yeah.
basement there's not a single
Not a
window
great
in the
place.
basement. Yeah. I mean, it's all chopped up. And I mean, we've got a dehumidifier down there. I mean, the basement is, I can't do anything with the basement. I mean, it's not there. No, I mean, I don't foresee anything in the basement because there's not a single window. So, and then the second floor, will just kind of be like open workspace. There is a existing tenant on the second floor that does prosthetic legs, like actually builds the clay models. And it's just 2 people that work in that space. And they take like probably, I don't know, a third or a little more, 3,500 square feet of the second floor. And they've been there, and it's just two folks, a gentleman that builds the legs and another woman. And they renewed their lease for another 2 years, I guess, right? Because this deal was sort of closing, I guess. Right before I purged.
I'm gonna say we included them as far as the calculations for everything as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so and from the staff report, and I believe the simplified site plan, the second floor is storage as well. You said it might be workspace. By the information provided, it can only be at this point.
Yeah.
We're looking
I'm
at
not doing anything like my budget is maxed out on the first floor, basically. I have a loan with Bank of America to do the first floor. So basically the second floor is just sitting there. It's not my focus.
Unfortunately, we may be in the same case. We will be in the same situation once the second floor try to apply a use to the second floor.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now there's 2 aspects of the administrative adjustment. One, which can be requested. One is the fact that the ordinance itself doesn't have a specific allowance for a type of use, which I think that's somewhat the argument that this type of real estate use isn't equal to your typical office use, which the parking counts are generated off of, but the ordinance itself doesn't allow for relief or doesn't have that specific use listed with some type of parking calculation associated with it. So that's where the administrative adjustment comes in, allows for something the ordinance typically wouldn't allow, but might be recognized elsewhere in practice in other jurisdictions and just in the general development world. The other aspect of it is it is recognized as a downtown parking area, which you're within, that does have a requirement that if you can't meet parking, there is some thought that that parking that is being met is being provided and supplied by the city in some fashion. And that is that benefit assessment aspect of it as well. I think I mentioned this to you initially at that $2,500 per space, but then there's an additional fee per space. I'm mentioning that because I'm hesitant to grant 24 parking spaces outright. If I had a little bit more data, I might be more tempted or able to, but any approval that I would give would be stipulated on the fact of how you operate in this specific use. So any change in office use, I think we'd have to reevaluate this. And the ordinance itself could be updated in that at that time frame, which could also provide for lesser accounts and maybe a little bit more beneficial in the future. Right now, I think I'm only comfortable approving around the 50% mark, where I'll say 14 parking spaces, which I could give an administrative adjustment to, thereby requiring additional 10 parking spaces having to be provided, either through that benefit assessment process, or provided offsite in some other location that the ordinance allows. If you're understanding that concept, I'm just not comfortable giving outright 24, approving 24 reduction.
Okay.
Okay.
So
So-
sorry, Joy, can I? So
Yeah,
Mark,
go,
right,
Dave.
right now, you think you'd be comfortable with 10, so I would have to pay $25,000 and then an annual fee per spot. And then if I were to look for off-site parking, is there a certain like radius or parameters? That's the one thing I'm not like really clear about. Because the previous owner had an agreement with the fire station or something that they made me aware of. Like, like that's what you're sort of talking about, of finding something offsite.
Yeah, if there's ability to get offsite, you always have that option. At the end of the day, the 10 parking spaces would have to be there, therefore provided. And it can be through a parking agreement with adjacent property owner, nearby property owner. There is a limit to distance, but we can work with that distance if it's reasonable. That's one aspect, or it's them buying out that, doing the benefit assessment, which goes to the property, and I make that clear. I'd make it go to the property, not to the use. So if there was any change of use, and there has been a change in the ordinance over time, which we are looking at right now, potentially maybe the 10 is the only reduction or benefit assessment you would ever have to pay.
Mhm.
Or if it's ever reduced, we can certainly look at updating that agreement. I mean, obviously, the initial $2,500 back, it's the yearly, could be potentially
Yeah.
adjusted in the future.
Yeah, I feel it's like there's like a dangling carrot here. It's like you're mentioning that something may be changing. I mean, is that is that in 2023? That
We have
this
a
year?
parking study now that's
Mhm.
going on, that we're looking at the availability of parking downtown, and we're finding we have a surplus of parking.
Right.
But the question is, when does demand equal surplus? And also the city itself has plans for redeveloping downtown, which certainly could take up parking spaces. So we are looking at how we practice parking. We're looking at 25% reduction, and possibly that could increase. We're also looking at this 2,500, which could increase or decrease.
Right.
I think from the study, the draft we saw, they're recommending an increase of the 2,500, because the thought is that money goes to maintaining and also potentially to future parking structures downtown to
Mhm.
address any redevelopment of downtown and loss of parking.
Right.
So,
all right. So you think it's likely going up? Because I was just going to say, if you think
it-
it's going away, is there any way for you to grant me this and I not actually pay the money until you guys get through that?
I
But
would
you think
say
it's going up.
the benefit assessment would not go away.
Okay.
There'd still be benefit assessment. There is the possibility that the total number of parking spaces, for an example, instead of 25%, maybe it's a 40% initial reduction.
Right. So maybe I
they-
would gain a couple parking spots down the road if you change things, and then
Yeah,
I would have a couple parking
potentially.
spots toward the second floor if I ever did anything.
Yeah, exactly. It could
Okay.
potentially help you change reuse of the property, the second floor. You could gain spaces, and therefore the 10 that you have would be sufficient for
Another
developing
couple-
out the
Building
second
out.
floor.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
And we'll
I
also
didn't,
we're looking
Sorry, go
at
on.
parking regulations too, obviously, which we're talking about tonight. There's a limit to it. And there certainly could be a mixed use concept, which the ordinance itself doesn't allow. If you have a mix of uses on the property that operate at different times, or it could function at different times through capacity, and that could be one of the arguments as well, with how you operate. That could certainly reduce the number of parking spaces on site as well.
gotcha.
So we are looking at updating the ordinance. Which again, to be a little bit more business friendly for downtown, but again, I do not see the benefit assessment aspect leaving.
Okay.
There's still, because the city, like I said itself, has plans of redeveloping surface lots. And to do that, you have to replenish the parking somehow, and that's only going to be by going up.
Sure. I mean, we came in, we needed 24 spaces, and you're willing to cut that more than half off. I mean, that's greatly appreciated. So, I'm grateful for that. If that's what we can come to.
Do I understand it correctly? Are we going from 24 to 14 or 24 to 10?
10.
24 to 10.
Oh, awesome.
10. Yeah, I mean, that's greatly appreciated, Mark. I mean, yes, that would if that's what you guys, and I know that this is maybe not the final ruling, but yes, that would be greatly appreciated and a big help. I mean, this was something that I was not aware of when I got into this deal, and this building is a lot more than I thought. But anyway, that's not your problem. But that would be greatly appreciated. So yeah, I mean, and I know you mentioned one thing at the beginning, that you wouldn't have a final sort of letter out or whatever decision for 30 days.
Yeah.
We are struggling to keep our contractor team alive on this deal. Is there any possibility after tonight's hearing, you don't have a decision, that we could work on a building permit to start framing?
I believe so. I think we can work on getting the notes necessary for the staff report or the simplified site plan to wrap that up. We've worked with two of the clients on following you on some language that kind of opens it up, that, essentially states that administrative adjustment was granted on a certain day, to what extent the grant was, and then the remaining 10 has to be provided through this benefit assessment or offsite. We have language already that is kind of open, but it allows you to proceed. We just wouldn't do use and occupancy until those 10 spaces
Are paid
done.
for.
So
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
'cause
we've got months and months. We just need to get building.
yeah, I
Building
think
permit.
we could wrap up the simplified site plan rather quickly.
yeah.
With some
It-
notes to get
right.
you moving with the
I
building
think
permit.
if we started framing tomorrow, I still don't think we're gonna be done until January, February. Just with all the different trades that need to get in there, all the things that have to get measured, and you can't measure them until everything's framed, and glass getting measured and blah blah blah. So kitchen, countertops got to be measured. So the way we do things is not slamming it together. So it's going to take us 9 months to renovate, and I have a 9-month loan, and so I'm gonna have to already probably get an extension with my loan. So I want to be able to show Bank of America that I'm doing something.
Okay, well, why don't we plan to set up a meeting either tomorrow or Friday, hopefully finalize simplified site plan, so we can do for the building permit.
Okay,
Okay.
Joy, is that something you can work with Mark on?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
above my clueless when it comes to that stuff.
And
Okay.
Joy, I'll reach out with you to schedule a meeting.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right,
I
that's all I had. If you guys have no other questions, let's close out
No.
this one. Let's move to the
Yeah.
next. Thank you very much.
no other questions right now. Thank you guys so much for your time. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you. We'll
Thanks.
talk to you soon.
Thank you all. Have a
Okay.
nice evening.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you, Andrew. If you can, hold on, let me do the swearing in first. For the second case, which is 2305 for 92 to 96 West Main. Anybody that's preparing to testify, if you could raise your right hand, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I supposed to testify? It's Brian Brook.
If you're planning on it, if you could just raise your right hand. You don't have to, but if you decide to, let's
Okay.
just. So do
Okay,
you
my hand's off.
swear? Do you swear that the evidence you shall give in this administrative adjustment case action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Andrea, if you want to move forward with your staff report, please.
Sure. This is for administrative adjustment case 2205. An application by 9296 West Main Street LLC, the applicant and property owner, requesting approval for the administrative adjustment for 9294 West Main Street. For essentially the same parking section that we just spoke about, 164, 111C, to allow a reduction in the number of required parking spaces. The applicant is requesting the administrative adjustment to establish residential and commercial uses in the existing buildings on site. The administrative adjustment application is requesting a reduction of 5 parking spaces. On June 12th, an application was submitted to the Department of Community Planning and Development for this administrative adjustment. The property is zoned CB business, and it indicates that the owner is 9296 West Main Street LLC. The property currently contains a 2-story building fronting West Main Street and a 2-story accessory building fronting Winter Street. The applicant is proposing to renovate the first floor of 9294 West Main Street for a commercial space, specifically a photography studio, while maintaining 2 one-bedroom apartments on the second floor of 94 West Main Street. In addition, the applicant is proposing to use the rear structure fronting on Winter Street for storage for the apartments and the commercial uses. Both the photography studio and those apartments are both allowed in the CB zone. The property was posted with the notice, and property owners did have the opportunity, adjacent property owners were given notice. And we did hear from one property owner, and I apologize, my computer just glitched and that one closed, but we did have a property owner who did write in support of this administrative adjustment. And by the end of it, I should be able to pull it up and to let you know, if you have any questions about that. So here we have, as far as administrative adjustments goes, the applicant should understand that the administrative adjustment is an exception to the general requirement imposed under Chapter 164, and it is not a matter of right. The applicant bears the burden of persuasion and proof to justify the granting of this administrative adjustment. A simplified site plan SS 2215 was submitted in October of 2022 for all of the space purposes that we just spoke about. And the applicant has submitted the appropriate water and sewer allocation application, which is WSA 2260 for this project. There are total 16 parking spaces that are required. There's a 25% reduction of 4 spaces, leaving 12 spaces is what is required for this project. There are 7 proposed on-site parking spaces, which is how we got for the 5 space reduction that is being requested. In the staff report, there's various reasons as to why the applicant feels that they should be granted this administrative adjustment. I am going to focus on the findings of fact and the conclusion of law. Staff recommends that the director consider the following of findings of fact and conclusion of law while considering this administrative adjustment. The administrative adjustment is being requested to allow for a reasonable and allowed use in the CB Central Business Zone to operate at the property. Property is located in the Westminster Historic District, and the primary structure of this property was built in 1840. The property has operated as a commercial and residential uses in the past without providing any additional on-site parking spaces. There are city-owned parking lots in proximity to the property. There are 7 proposed on-site parking spaces being provided. And it's not unusual for properties in the historic district to provide required on-site parking spaces, but do also need this adjustment in order to reduce the total number of parking spaces. And the authorizing of the administrative adjustment will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property owners and will not materially impair the purpose of this chapter or public interest. Staff recommends approval of the proposed administrative adjustment, and there are representatives here if you do have any additional questions.
Thank you. Questions of staff? Go to the applicant. Would like to speak. Hurst?
I'm sorry, you faded. Get this.
No questions for Andrea. I'm just, so let's move on to the applicant's comments or testimony.
Well,
Go ahead.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Oh, boy.
Can you guys hear me? Mark, this is Scott.
Scott, it's tough.
Okay.
Oh, Brian, we can hear you.
Oh, you can? Okay. I wanted to just say one thing. They say photography studio, but she's actually a craft. So she'll do stuff like sewing also, not just like knitting. It's knitting, sewing, watercolor, photography. So it's not just photography.
Okay.
Mark, I just a recommendation as part of the administrative adjustment, if the simplified site plan could be revised just to show that. Because
Arts and crafts.
yeah, it's very specific on the simplified site plan saying that the photography studio. So if there are other uses, it may be something to consider changing the the simplified site plan to show that.
I have a question on. When we sent the administrative adjustment application in, we did send a revised site plan with that. I'm not sure if you have that or not, but we did change some language on that parking. One due to that, and some other changes that Brian was going to suggest to reduce the parking some. Do you recall seeing that, Andrea?
Andrea, you muted.
I know, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. I thought I incorporated everything, but I'm pulling it, I'm gonna try and pull it up now to see if there's something perhaps that we missed. As far as the administrative adjustment goes for this case, the parking requirement is linked to a commercial space. The number of parking for a commercial space. So I don't know that, that would be impacted at all. It was just the simplified site plan, but I'll take a look.
Okay.
Can you bring that up?
Yes, hold on just a moment. Oh, hold on, I'm sorry. So the one that I have from, it was sent on the Monday, June 12th at 5:02. Is that the one that you're talking about, Scott?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to stop my current share and I'm going to share this one. And this is what I based my information off of. Can you let me know if you can see that okay? I just zoomed in, but I can zoom in farther if you need me to.
Oh, my goodness.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because it does say right here, I'm sorry, photographic studio for the proposed use.
Okay.
That's my fault because in my time trying to get this done, I've lost probably 2, maybe 3 tenants, and one was only a photographer person.
Okay.
But that has been replaced with a lady in her 70s who is does quilting and sewing. I don't know a great deal about quilting and sewing, but it's she's an aficionado in that, and is very, but also she's very supportive of arts and crafts and what they do across the street in the old movie theater with arts and crafts.
I think the general notes on the first sheet were not updated from the previous submission. The parking count on the last sheet, or this, I think sheet 3, was updated to reflect the changes that I wanted to make, and we also
It's on this thing.
got some more accurate dimensions of the square footage of the different uses inside the buildings for the commercial uses. And we also provided an additional compact parking spot, I believe, with this submission.
Yeah, this here just says that the commercial establishment, as far as what's required. Here is the, oh, I'm sorry, the parking spaces that are being proposed.
And we also showed one inside the carriage house on this one as well.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Yes,
They show the limit of disturbance on the parking as 3,700, and I can't read that, 7 square feet. But if I'm allowed for like under 5,000, why can't I make it bigger and add another spot to make a total, instead of 7, make a total of 8?
We tried to fit another spot in there, and it would be impacting that retaining wall, which is, I don't know if you can see where the retaining wall. I see that triangle.
Oh, I know it. I know it very well. Yes.
Yeah, it would be, so that 8th spot would be impacting that retaining wall.
and let's see.
Well, and also, if I did not have the dumpster, because they use a regular, normal city pickup of trash cans, and so it's unclear if I'm required to have the dumpster area or not. I thought I could have the city just pick up the trash the way they have for the last 50 years. And if we did not have a dumpster, wouldn't that change it? Where I can get more, I can move my 3,700 square feet up to like 4,999.
No, a parking space needs to be a minimum 8 feet off the rear property line from the alleyway. So you can't have a parking space starting right at the rear property line. The other issue is whether we accept the compact space or not really hasn't been determined. And so it's hard to say that this is a guarantee to 7 parking spaces, but I think that's what the request, I think the request contemplated this design, that 7 were proposed on site, which this is showing. And therefore 5 additional parking, you need 5 additional parking spaces. The other element too is that the parking backing out into the alleyway has to be for residential purposes. Anything commercial based has to enter and exit in the forward motion. So, and you need 7 for the residential. So the parking here, so again, we're still, I think the request is, and as what Andrew's provided, seems to reflect this site plan where it's saying that there are 7 proposed on-site parking spaces. The applicant is proposing 5 space reduction from the required number of parking spaces of 12. So I think the staff report is accurate in reflecting what we're seeing here. Does anybody have any questions about that?
We reduced the parking count based on conversation that Brian had with Randy here and the more accurate measurements we have on the square footage. Also previously, Brian had mentioned to me that there was multi-family residential units in one of the buildings on in one of the buildings, but there was he actually reiterated that and said they're only 1-bedroom apartments. So that reduced the parking requirement slightly due to that.
And if
I
you
think
look,
it went from 7 to 6, I think. on
if we look at the
residential.
staff, if we look at the staff report, it says that in the first floor of 9294, that's where the commercial space is going to go. We have 1,550 square feet of commercial. And then you need 6.2 spaces for that. On the second floor of that building, it is showing 2 one-bedroom apartments at 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit, with 2 of them is 3 spaces. So now we're at 9.2 needed. Then the back building, and this is going off of Brian, my discussion with you, you're not proposing office in that space, it's warehouse only. And that was calculated for warehouse at 2,550 square feet, requiring 2.5 spaces. So at that point, we're up to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.7. And then we get to the 2 semi-attached dwelling units, which need 4 parking spaces.
I think
So
it's,
that-
I think
So we
it's
get,
very-
a-
I
so we
think
get
they
a,
are
to- we get a, so we, from the discussions, Brian, we had, and again, from what you, Scott, what you just mentioned, it still comes out to be 16 parking spaces needed. And then with a 25% reduction of 4 spaces that there, then you get to the 12 that are needed for the site. So I think the staff report does address what you've just said, Scott and Brian, from our discussion, to drop it down from a previous, because before we had office in that back building. And the first floor commercial is going to be commercial. It just is easier to calculate. Anything you're proposing so far, Brian, would still fall under that commercial calculation. That would get to the 6.2 spaces.
So we had one comment on that, Mark, and
Mhm.
Andrew, if you scroll down a little bit to show all the parking calculations there. We determined that inside the commercial building, some of that is a staircase, some of it's a bathroom, some of it's not all commercial use, which is why we separated some of that, the 520 square feet as an other use, and reduced the commercial square footage to reduce it by 1 spot there as well. Just to
Yeah, the
help. just try
ordinance,
to- much as
yeah, the
we
ordinance
can.
looks at gross square footage. It doesn't subtract from bathrooms and hallways and other things. It's looking at the entire square footage, the gross square footage of the commercial space.
Okay. Okay, so we'll change that back then.
I think for
Okay.
the staff report, I think reflects what the ordinance requires and the discussions I've had with Brian for the back building to eliminate that office use, which added some parking.
Okay,
But so with that, I still think we're looking at a 5 parking spaces needed for the use. Outside of what's being provided on site. Yeah, the 5% reduction for bike racks is not to the number of parking spaces. It allows you the compact spaces. It allows a reduction to the parking area, not the number of parking spaces. That's let's see, section 164, 111 G, where it says required off-street parking spaces may be reduced in area by providing designated parking space for bicycles, motorcycles, or motorbikes or motorcycles. But in no event shall be a reduction in area be permitted on more than 5% of the total number of required spaces. So that's why I think we have to look at that compact aspect of it, if it meets the requirements of the ordinance.
okay.
May I ask a question? The parking demand that the city has, is it more severe during the 9 to 5 period, Monday to Friday, or is it more severe on weekends and evenings and holidays?
I would say the parking, again, it's an old ordinance, was generated off of what would have been standard parking counts that look at just a general commercial type of use on multiple examples to calculate what would be a reasonable amount of parking spaces for that square footage. It's based on the 24-hour use. I don't think it's limited. You can, and that's what we talked about. If you're listening to the previous case, there are shared parking concepts that do look at hours of operation and types of uses that some uses operate during peak time is during the day, others at nighttime. And it does allow you use percentages to get a reduction in parking. Our ordinance doesn't do that. But we have allowed that through these adjustments that could demonstrate that type of use.
So there's no it's more how the rule is written than it is. You have more people aren't staying away Monday to Friday because they can't find a parking spot 9 to 5.
Potentially,
It's not-
yeah. So it would look at multiple hours throughout the day, 9 to 5, from 5 to 10, and obviously percentage of how much you need reduces during the daytime for residents, increases at probably 100% for office, maybe 40%. So there are standards, and they do look at percentages of hours per day for each type of use that then generates a maximum that's needed for the site. That's typically a lot less than you would require for each individual use. And that's something we are looking at for updating the ordinance to allow a mix of use like yours that could take advantage of some type of calculation to get a reduction.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
It's just not allowed right now. And that's where, again, I think that's the purpose of the administrative adjustments, that gives me that ability to reduce the number of parking because the ordinance is lacking in some aspects. Again, it's just without further study and not having that actual chart and to look at, it's again, just like the last previous case, I'm hesitant to give 100%, as you can imagine, of parking, because again, it's just without absolute clarity, just makes it difficult.
Well, I don't know if this helps or hurts, but there are city lots nearby, and then I own 113, 115 across the street, which again, how I can fit the number of cars I can fit on compared to the number of cars that you allow in the, like expanding the parking lot in the back from 3,700 square feet to 5,000, and you can't fit an extra car in there. They're doing it now. They're parking 7 or 8 cars there now, and you're saying reduce it to 6, but I understand. I just telling you what's happening there. There is not the issue with it now. Over at 113-115, I would be able to put, if I angle them in, probably 8, probably 9 cars. I haven't really studied it because there's a ton of grass back there, a ton of area that it's under 5,000 feet the way it pulls in, and you can angle it on both sides going into it.
But again, but Brian, it's twofold. It's one, it has to meet the parking standards of the city for the parking space width, length, angle. And again, it's, if you're entering for commercial use, you have to enter and exit in the forward motion. So it can't be all backing out vehicles to an extent for commercial use. For residential use, because I guess the thought is it's less traffic, less number of peak demand as your trips out of the house back and forth to residential as it would be for commercial use. So there are, it made by, and we looked at that. From the eye, it may seem like it's available, but once you do a plan, which we'd have to do similar to this one, we would need to see that engineered plan that demonstrates that it's meeting what the ordinance is requiring for the parking space dimensions and design.
Well, as far as the commercial cars backing out, why can't I have a commercial vehicle back in so it can head first?
Because it has to enter and exit in a forward motion.
I could see where they could do that easily at 113-115. And there's a city lot nearby also, just as you know. And neither the glass storefront or the rear carriage house will have any office in it. If there are any office walls there now, we'll take them down. Insofar as the apartments, we rent them all as 1 bedroom. Where they're not being rented as 2 bedrooms. So I think that they're in the one, I think I need 6 and not 7 or 8 in the apartments. The bike rack you went over, the 25% downtown reduction you addressed. I've never met you. Is that Scott Landis?
Yep.
Yeah, hi.
Yes, sir.
Hi. We've not met. We've not met. And I would like to meet at the parking lot and review the 33,707 feet to 4,999 and parking on that lot. I look at the retaining walls. I just find that one, I have a hard time with that one because I think you can fit more cars in there, and they do it beautifully now. So, anyway, so that's what I have to say on this. I think we're taking too many spaces for the residents. I have a whole argument that no one in the city wants to listen to, and I understand why, because they say it won't apply, but this is affordable housing, and in affordable housing, it by its very nature, people do not own vehicles. If it's a standard Class A building or Class B building, people are going to pay several $1,000s a month in rent, and they're going to need 2 and 3 parking spots. 80% of my tenants do not have cars. 80% of my tenants do not have cars, and in this subject property, 1 person has a car out of 4 in this subject, but nobody cares because the city council has said to me, "Well, Brian, what if they move out and somebody moves in and has 5 cars?" Well, anybody that owns 5 cars, believe me, is not going to be moving into one of these affordable housing apartments. This is like I find it hard, and nobody wants to have the landlord sign a statement saying that it's affordable housing or the number, and I run into this. I have plenty of parking lots throughout the city, plenty of parking space. But again, I'm supposed to have 1.5 cars for a one bedroom unit. My building where I have 32 or 33 units, I have 40 parking spots, maybe 39 parking spots. I'm supposed to have 45 or 48. But of my 33 tenants, I would say 13 have cars. 20 spots are vacant every single day, and I can't use them because they're afraid a wealthy person will move in, or someone that is more affluent and that owns several cars. Poor people that rent some of these apartments, if they own cars, honestly, they'd go live in them. They would not rent. They wouldn't rent.
Can I just, there's, and we've had that discussion, the ordinance doesn't allow
Yes.
restrictive elements like that. I'm not sure how I could enforce limiting one vehicle. I don't have staff to come out there every day to count vehicles to make sure that it's enforced. And also parking doesn't only account for the people that live there, it counts for visitors too. So when these calculations are made up, it's just not solely the number of vehicles that are being used by people living there. It also accounts for visitations. So that one person may have one vehicle, but their visitor comes in and pulls in, and they need a parking space because they're visiting. So again, it's just not only solely based on the number of vehicles the individual owns in
Right,
each
sure.
apartment.
But Mark, you could have each landlord sign an affidavit every year. They have to pay a licensing fee every year, and they could sign an affidavit as to the caliber.
That doesn't stop enforcement. That doesn't stop me having to go out to enforce that you're providing, or that it's lesser than what is typically allowed. It's just difficult.
Mhm. So the worry is that I'll start to rent to affluent tenants that want swimming pools and garages for their BMWs, and I don't think that's going to be happening in a lot of the apartments. And I wish it would, but I don't think that's going to be happening with the number of people that are on pensions or in Section 8 housing in the city. Certain neighborhoods in the city, yes, I can see it. I believe it, sure, in certain parts of the city, but not in a lot of the apartments.
Yeah. I think we're kind of getting off track here from the
Sure,
discussion
yes,
at
sir.
hand and the request.
Okay.
Scott, do you have anything else?
No.
Does anyone have any questions for me?
No, just to clarify that it is accurate that the first floor is commercial. The second floor is 2 one-bedroom apartments. The other property is a duplex. And the back building is going to be for warehouse only. I just went for confirmation because we had that discussion.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want to make sure we have the numbers correct, because as we're going forward and any decision we make, we have to follow by this information. So with that, again, I'm as the previous case, I'm hesitant to give an outright reduction in parking. I do think that there has been use of this property before in a commercial nature, and that should have some weight in this discussion. So of the 5 reduction, I'd be amenable to reducing that to down to 2 required. So administrative adjustment of 3 parking spaces for the operation, leaving 2 additional parking spaces needed to be addressed. And we've had discussion either through the benefit assessment process or providing it at another property.
Mark, I just wanted to let you know, Dave Bollinger was the person that we received the comment letter from, who was the support and the reduction of number of required parking spaces for the location.
Okay, thank you.
He's an influential, he's very well known in the city, Dave Bellinger. And he was in favor.
He
And-
said, I support the reduction in the number of required parking spaces. Says, I believe Mr. Brook would be an asset to our neighborhood and this property. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Well, so what happens next, Mark?
So,
Andrea?
again, we'd have to update the simplified site plan accordingly. The notes would have to be amended. We'd have to reference the administrative adjustment case. There's already a note on the site plan that references whatever additional parking needs to be met through X, Y, and Z. It's already on the plan, just has, so that note is adequate still. So just updating notes, then I think the simplified site plan can be done. And then we can work with getting you in, somebody in that space. In the meantime, we'll have to address the 2 parking spaces.
Okay, well, can I look at the city lot that is nearby? There's a city lot, I guess to the south, I guess it is. There's that lot, and that's within 100. I mean, I think 100 feet even, perhaps. It's not far at all. It's in the same block, and even though we don't have a site plan yet on 113-115 West Main Street, if that only has 3 units in it. That building has only 3 total units. Even though we don't have the site plan, can we use any of the parking from there?
My guess, we'd have to look at that. You'd have to demonstrate that the parking on site is adequate to meet the parking needed for the businesses on site and the residential on site, as well as additional 2 parking spaces.
So it's got 2 apartments at 1.5 each, that's 3. And then it has a retail store that is probably 70% storage.
But again,
80% storage.
that's an option. The note references your options of how you can meet any additional parking. It's either through the benefit assessment, which essentially is paying for city spaces, or providing it off-site. So yeah, again,
Okay.
so this determination will come out and you still have that option. It's just you're demonstrating to us how you're meeting it.
Brian would have to have a site plan made for that property to ensure that it has adequate parking for what he wants, right?
Yes.
So we'd have to do the same exercise for that property, Brian, as we did for this one, just so you're aware. And you want to look at the retaining wall, maybe doing some reconstruction of that retaining wall to possibly fit another space in there. Is that what I understood, Brian?
Yes. I mean, I'd like to
Sounds like-
meet there. I'd like to meet there one day if that's possible. And then look
Okay.
at 113, 115 West Main.
We can,
And then I'm still talking to a next door neighbor that we have about their space.
Well, I think, gentlemen, I think this discussion we can have after the fact, because again, we still have to meet it some way. You just have to demonstrate to us how. So we can follow up this meeting with a follow-up meeting about addressing the parking.
Okay.
So thank you. The bottom line is I need 2 additional spots somewhere.
Yes.
Okay. And my tenant has tried to start fixing up the property already. I'm not trying to repeat what Mr. Cummings said earlier in his hearing, but I'm going to lose the tenant if I don't I'm afraid to grant her a lease or maybe a contingent. I guess I can give her a contingency lease that this has to get approved. So
Again, well, we can talk about that in the next few days. Why don't we plan a meeting either tomorrow or Friday?
I can reach out, Brian, and see what your schedule allows for a meeting.
I'm completely, you guys, I've tried to rent this for 2 years. I'm completely free to meet on this any day, anytime. So,
Okay.
but everyone, thank you. Matt, is that Kevin? Is that Kevin? Hi, it's nice to see you. And
Hi, Brian.
that's Andrea. Thank you. I haven't met you, Andrea, either. And thank you, Mark, very much.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you, Matt.
everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. I'm going
Bye.
to sign off.
Bye.
Bye now.
Mark, for the record, I just wanted to, we got an email later today, and it was about case 2304. It was in support, but I just wanted to make sure that it was into the record about the 56 West Main project.
Okay,
So Daniel Staley, he just wanted to say, in my absence, I'm writing to express my support for the project moving forward. As a business and a property owner in downtown Westminster, I feel that there's enough parking in the downtown area to support this business. So
okay,
I just wanted to make
Okay.
sure that that letter was read into the record in favor of 56 West Main.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll pass that
Thank
on too.
Thank you. Thank you. I apologize. Until I opened my email to get the to pull that site plan up, I did not I hadn't seen that email, so I wanted to make sure that it was read.
okay.
I'll let them know. They'll love to know that somebody had something good to say about it. So thanks. Appreciate
Okay,
it.
And last but not least, we're gonna move on to 2306 and Kevin. Is Kevin for this one?
No, I don't.
Do we have
know.
anybody for this one?
I don't.
Any from BPR?
I didn't think.
No, it's not. That's
I
not
was
our
saying I don't
project.
think BPR was involved in this project. So
No.
Okay,
Yeah. I think
Nice
I'm
cut.
done here.
okay, thanks a lot.
Yep,
Bye.
bye.
so as I was
Okay,
saying
not seeing
earlier.
not seeing anybody on. I have no one to swear in, so if you could move forward with your staff report.
Sure. I'm just going to pull up. Here you go. Can you you can see the screen? I mean, you can see
Yes.
that.
Yep.
Okay. So this one is administrative adjustment 2306. An application by 31 West Main LLC, the property owner, requesting an approval for administrative adjustment for 31 West Main Street to allow for the reduction of the total number of required parking spaces. The applicant is requesting the administrative adjustment to establish an autonomous vehicle trade school. The administrative adjustment application is requesting a reduction of 9 parking spaces. On June 13th, an application was submitted to the Department of Community Planning and Development for the administrative adjustment requested at 31 West Main Street, and this is in the rear. The property is Zone CB business zone, and online records indicate that the owner is in fact 31 West Main Street. The property contains 3-story buildings fronting on West Main Street that steps down to a 1-story fronting on Union Alley. The applicant is proposing to renovate the first floor of 31 West Main Street in the rear, which fronts Union Alley, to an autonomous vehicle trade school, while maintaining the furniture store on the first floor and the apartments on the second and third floor, as well as a portion of the building that fronts on West Main Street. The schools, which include trade schools, are permitted use in that zoning district. The property was posted with the notice of our sign, as well as the adjoining property owners. We have not heard of no letters from property owners or anything talking about this property. And we have received a water and sewer allocation application from for this project. An applicant should understand, as far as administrative adjustments go, that this is an exception to the general requirement imposed by Chapter 164 and is not a matter of right. The applicant bears the burden of persuasion and proof to justify the need for this administrative adjustment. The simplified site plan SS 2306 was submitted in April of this year to renovate the first floor of the property that fronts on Union Alley, which is the rear, to an autonomous vehicle trade school. And as I said previously, with the furniture store and all the apartments staying in place. There is a total requirement of, let's see here, of 28 parking spaces. They also get that 25% reduction of 7 parking spaces, which leaves 21 parking spaces as what they need. There's an existing agreement that was approved through a simplified site plan on a nearby property that allows them to use 12 parking spaces for this use. The applicant is then requesting the reduction of 9 parking spaces. And so the rest of the site, the rest of the information can be found on the staff report. But I'm here to talk about the finding of facts and conclusion of law. Staff recommends that the director consider the following as findings of fact and conclusion of law. The administrative adjustments are being requested to allow for a reasonable and allowed use in the CB Central Business Zone to operate at the property. Property is located in the Westminster Historic District, and the primary structure at the property was built in 1929. The property's operated commercial and residential uses in the past without providing additional on-site parking spaces. There are city-owned parking lots in close proximity to the property. There's an existing agreement that was approved through Simplified Site Plan 2307 for the use of 12 parking spaces to be provided for this use. As previously stated in the other cases, it's not unusual for properties in the historic downtown to provide required on-site parking spaces, but also then needing to request to reduce the number of parking spaces. And authorizing of this administrative adjustment will not be in substantial detriment to the adjacent properties and will not materially impair the purpose of this chapter or public interest. Staff recommends approval of the proposed administrative adjustment.
Okay. I'm not seeing anybody here. We have no report from the applicant.
No.
I'm just going to move on with my decision. I'm going to accept staff's finding and grant the 9 parking space reduction for this property.
Thank you.
And I think that completes it. Unless Andrew, you have anything you want to add?
I do not.
So that's it for tonight. Then let's close out and have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.